again for joining us today. And at this time, I will turn it over to Hannah from the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, Office of Child and Family Services. Welcome, Hannah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah, and as Liz said, I am here today on behalf of the Office of Child and Family at DBHDS. First, I want to thank Liz and Elaine at Virginia Tech for helping support and host this training on behalf of our office. I also have the pleasure of introducing our speaker today. Karen is a child and adolescent program specialist within our office. She has an incredibly diverse background and has worked in the field for many years, and you'll see she brings both a deep clinical experience as well as a strong systems level perspective to this work. I've also attended this training myself and found it really incredibly informative and really shifted the way I think about trauma-informed care. So I hope all of you walk away with that same perspective and some practical insights and takeaways from today's training. So thank you again for being here today. And with that, I will hand it over to Karen.
Good morning, everybody. I see so many familiar faces that it's hard not to be like, oh my gosh, hi. So forgive my excitement, but I am really happy to be here this morning and see so many of you guys. I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully it all works here, that you just see my presentation and not all my little notes or.
Looks perfect.
Okay, awesome. That is wonderful. Still looking perfect?
You got it.
Yes. Good. Okay, now I can see you guys and my presentation. I feel good about life. So yes, I'm Karen. If you've never met me, I've been at DBHDS now for almost 5 years. Prior to that, I worked directly in the community, providing intensive services. Most of my work has been with children. So if I talk a lot about kids and kids services when I give examples, just know that's because it's what I kind of am rooted in, but I encourage you to think about what we talk about today in the context of every human being. We're talking about language changes, and I truly approach this with this is how I interact with everyone in my world now, not just my clients, not just as a professional, but some of the language shifts have informed how I interact with my loved ones, with coworkers, with everyone, because at the end of the day, we are all human beings and we all have connection needs and wounds from the past. And that's what we're going to spend today talking about. I've gone back and forth even on the title of this training because trauma-informed care has really been a buzzword for many years. Like, make sure you get your trauma training, make sure you know what that means. But for a lot of us, you get the information on trauma, but what do you then do with it? How does it then inform your day-to-day work? And how do you implement it? What does that look like? So today we're going to spend less time talking about what is trauma. We're really going to focus on relational wounds. So what happens when disruptions, pains, experiences within relationships create negative impacts on people, rather than your more like shock traumas of accidents or natural disasters. So I just wanted to lay that groundwork for you that we're really looking at relational wounds today. So standard learning objectives, we're going to quickly look at trauma-informed principles. We're going to spend 2 seconds on that. Then we're going to jump into how this impacts our sense of safety, some language shifts, and how and why this is beneficial. And again, I would stretch it to say not just with your clients, but with people in your life in general. What I truly hope for from today is that something sparks some curiosity in you. Something resonates in a way that hits different than any other training you've been in. You take a thing away that you can use this afternoon, tomorrow, whenever it is. And I also encourage you, if especially while we're going over some of the language shifts, something doesn't land for you, don't take it with you. Leave it behind. That's okay, right? We're going to go over a lot of them. And so even if you're like, oh, these are my 2 favorite, I'm going to take take them, leave the rest. So feel free to do what feels authentic and real for you as we talk about some of the language changes. So those are my true hopes and wishes for today's training. So with that, we will jump into it. SAMHSA has some great resources on trauma-informed care. If you've never been to the SAMHSA website, Google it. It's the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. They have an entire, it's called TIP 57. TIP stands for Treatment Improvement Protocol. It's a free downloadable PDF. Yes, we will be sharing the slides. And so if you go there and just want to find resources on trauma-informed care, it is a wonderful resource. So you can take that nugget with you today. So on the screen are the 6 principles that inform trauma-informed care. Today, we're really just going to focus on that first box of safety, because it is the foundation to the other 5. If you've ever worked with individuals in therapy, in some kind of professional clinical relationship, when people don't feel safe, it does not allow us to be curious, to explore, to grow, to change. We have to feel safe in order to take some of those risks needed to change in our lives. So safety is the foundation to everything that we do. And oftentimes in our services, it's not the physical safety, right? I don't think anyone you work with is necessarily concerned that you're going to physically attack them. It's the emotional safety. It's the relational safety that's present in the relationship, in the clinical relationship. So that's where we're going to spend our time talking. Raise of hands. How many of you guys have seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs before? Yeah, just about everybody, right? It's this nice little pyramid. Yeah. All right. Lots of thumbs up. Lots of absolutely. I want to shift it a little bit. Have many of you seen this sailboat of safety before? Yeah, a few people. I love this image for lots of reasons. And I love the comment next to it. It really does a little bit more for me than the pyramid does. To put this into a sailboat image, to highlight that the bottom of the boat, these are the things that just keep people afloat, right? I need to feel safe to stay above water. Connected. We need to be connected to other human beings to stay above water. And self-esteem. Self-esteem is how we feel in our intrapersonal realm, right? How am I connected to myself? And is that relationship with self safe or not? So do we feel safe physically, interpersonally, and within ourselves? And if any one of those things is not present in someone's life, there's basically holes in your boat. And it makes staying afloat much more challenging. And I'm sure you've heard people describe before this sense of like, I feel like I'm drowning. I feel like the world is just overwhelming. There's too much going on. And it may be because the bottom of their boat has lots of holes in it. We really can't focus and find a direction towards purpose, love, and exploration until our boat is whole. And I encourage you to think about that just in the ways that some of the people you work with might feel pressure from people around them to have more motivation, more goals. Why aren't you closer to graduating or finding a job or doing all these things? They have really high expectations and you need more direction, right? These are like things that people we work with here. These are things you might hear in your own life. And the reality is that when you are just trying to stay afloat, you can't be heading in directions. You don't have a good direction. You're just trying to float. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, this image just gives me a framework of really trying to meet people where they're at. We say that a lot in our world of therapy and case management and all kinds of different services. Meet people where they're at. And this image just reminds me of, where are people at? Are they just trying to be okay? Or are they okay enough that they're ready to find direction? And I need to know kind of the difference in order to support them best. So yeah, life isn't a project or competition. It's a journey we travel through, and it's full of danger and uncertainty. So we need a really secure boat. I see the message of the presentation keeps freezing. Is that true for everyone? Am I having connection issues, or is it just, okay, all right. Just wanted to double check. Hopefully it works out for everybody. So understanding that this is our foundation of safety, we then move into, how do we create interpersonal and intrapersonal safety? Again, I already established, I'm pretty sure physical safety is not necessarily a concern people bring into our interactions. We're, typically not going to get aggressive or anything like that, but where is the interpersonal safety, and how do we encourage intrapersonal safety? So to start understanding those concepts a little deeper, these things begin in early childhood at a very, very early age. And the foundation begins before we can speak, or that we have cognitive memories as you and I think of memories. And early disruptions and wounds have a really long-term impact on our sense of interpersonal and intrapersonal safety. So we're going to talk about the research and the science behind this, so you're not just like, well, Karen says it starts early and has a long-term impact. There's actual research and science. So the first part of our training will be some of that research and science, and then the second part will be the language shifts. So what we're going to look at Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. Erik Erikson, that's a name you probably haven't heard since you were like a psychology undergrad, or some kind of back in possibly college or graduate work. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the adverse childhood experiences study, which I'm hoping many of you are familiar with. So we're not going to go real deep into the adverse childhood experiences, but just touch on it a little bit to remind everyone of the long-term impact of adversity early on in life. Do we have any questions so far in the chat? Are we doing okay? All right, I like the thumbs up. It helps me. So real quick, stages of psychosocial development. This has been around for a really long time. It's something I did not think a lot about until I actually think I went through the adoption competency training, and it kind of reminded me of, oh yeah, those first few years of life have a huge impact on us. And so year one is really like 0 to 1.5. And this is where Erik Erikson theorized that we develop a sense of trust versus mistrust. So if you successfully navigate this psychosocial development phase, you develop a sense of trust. And so what that looks like is between 0 and 1.5, you're in a situation where a caregiver is reliable, securely attached to you and taking care of you. So basically, when I cry, an adult attempts to meet my needs. It's really as basic as that. And I'm not even saying that an adult successfully stops me from crying as a baby, right? Crying is just something babies do, but they make efforts. Yes, they try to figure out, am I hungry? Am I tired? Am I in pain? What is this? And they attempt to meet my needs. And at a core of who I am, not a cognitive prefrontal cortex thing, because that doesn't exist yet in little babies, but as a core of who we are, we start to believe that the world is generally a safe place. People can be trusted. I express a need the only way I know how, by crying, and someone tries to help me. So generally speaking, there's a sense of safety and trust. However, for some babies during that time frame, 0 to 1.5, maybe they cry and they don't get consistent responses, whether that be from a parent's own substance use, their own mental health concerns, because they're working and can't be available, whatever the reason, there's an inconsistent or lack of response, or there's a harmful response. I cry and I get shaken, or I cry and I get hit. At a core of who we are from 0 to 1.5, the world is not trustworthy. The world is not safe. If I express a need and it gets met with nothing or with pain and hurt, it's not a safe place where I can feel like I can trust other people. And that's all before we can talk. That is all much earlier on than I personally have any memories of, right? I cannot tell you what 0 to 1.5 looked like for me in my life, but it impacted me and impacts every person that we work with. Phase 2 starts around 1.5 and goes until about 3, and that's autonomy versus shame. Does anybody in the room have a 1.5 to 3-year-old? Anybody? No? I'm sure somebody does. I mean, out of like 156 people, somebody's got to have a 1.5 to 3-year-old. So it's a really cool time in a kid's life. I say cool hesitantly because there's a lot going on. They learn at a rate that is just mind-boggling, like the amount of language development and physical development, the skills they could do that they couldn't do at 1.5, that they can do at 3 is it's amazing and it's awesome. And it's also the time where they start to learn things like no, or some of those temper tantrums, right? Some of those, I'm not doing that, you can't make me. And that is autonomy, right? They start to figure out they're their own being. And it's both exciting and can be very frustrating for parents at times. So during this period, successfully navigating this psychosocial development phase means that autonomy is really encouraged, that you're gently and lovingly challenging your young person, your little 1.5 to 3-year-old, to try new things, to explore, to be curious, to try tying their shoe, to try using the potty, to do new things. And the ways in which we celebrate them, I don't know if you've ever seen a 1.5-year-old go to the bathroom on the potty. Like, we cheer like they just, I don't know, did something miraculous and amazing and solved world peace, right? Because we want them to know we appreciate their efforts at growing and developing and how exciting that is. We also set up the environment in ways that protect them, right? This is the time period where you might have plug covers over your outlets, because part of curiosity is being curious about everything. And so you really develop a safe environment where they can be curious and can safely go out and try new things and be brave and be their own little person. When people are going through this and it's not the healthiest environment and they aren't necessarily encouraged or celebrated, and maybe they get yelled at because they're learning a new skill and it's just going too slow, right? So I'm trying to tie my shoe, but my parents rushed and needs to get out the door, so they throw the shoe at me instead of helping me through it. Or they tell me, you can't go now, and lock me in the house by myself for 7 hours. And there's this element of, neglect going on. In that world, instead of learning autonomy, at a core of who I am develops this deep sense of shame. And for 1.5 to 3, shame is really, I'm the problem, I'm unlovable, I'm broken. At this age, kids don't have the ability to separate my parents mad at the thing I did rather than mad at me. And so it becomes this deep-rooted sense of somehow something's wrong with me. And again, not thinking that way, but feeling that way at a core of who we are, somewhere deep inside of us. And so the other impact of that is the impact on curiosity and learning. If I'm unlovable, if I'm broken, if when I try new things I get yelled at or neglected, I don't feel like learning things or being curious or taking risks is a good thing. It's scary. I don't want to do it. And so if you can think about how these kids might show up in kindergarten when they're now in a classroom and they've got a lot to learn and teachers are trying to encourage them to try new things, they may not feel like that's okay. They may feel like, no, like I don't want to do any of this. And they may shut down, or they may get angry, or they may start yelling and screaming, or try to leave the classroom. All these behaviors that can present because of what they've gone through during trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame. So that's the psychosocial development. There are phases beyond that. Obviously, we don't stop developing at 3, but these are the 2 that really, again, a lot of what we're talking about today is like, what's the foundation? What's the foundation for how we are as adults, older kids, whatever population you work with. And these 2 are really the foundation to the other phases. If these 2 don't go well, it complicates later on in life. So you might be trying to accomplish developmental skills of a 17-year-old while still trying to figure out who you can trust in the world. So it just complicates things. Any questions on psychosocial development? You guys are more than welcome to come off mute if you have a question or put it in the chat. So these are those other phases I was just talking about, just to give you a picture. If you want to do more digging on Eric Harrison's psychosocial development, please feel free. It is a helpful thing to think about sometimes if you ever feel stuck with somebody about what's happening or what's going on, or even helping people understand what's really typical. I worked with a lot of young adults who were like, I just don't feel like I know who I am. And I'm like, congratulations, you're in identity versus role confusion. Like that is where most teenagers are. So to just kind of be able to normalize and identify what is typical development, because sometimes we work with people who can panic about there's something wrong with this person that I love and care about. And it's like, well, actually, good news. This is pretty common for people to go through some of these challenges and have to explore this and figure out what's happening. So just some information for you to keep thinking about. The other science behind how what we go through early on and interpersonal safety really starts very, very young is the science behind brain development. These are the 5 really simple, really quick pieces of brain development that I personally have found the most useful for myself and for helping the people I work with, for helping the people I love understand what's happening inside of their brain, or what did happen that might impact them still today, even though it was years ago, right? I don't know if you've ever worked with people who've said, well, it happened 25 years ago. They should be over it by now. Yeah, I get that. I understand that would be what you want. However, we know early experiences impact brain development. So the first one is that neurons change, right? Neuroplasticity is a thing. You and I are not the same as we were when we were 1, 5, 8, 12, right? They change and grow and develop. And this susceptibility to change is a great thing, but also not so great if what's going on around you is negative or unsafe, because that also changes how your neurons grow and develop, changes the pathways. If you are not getting stimulus at all, especially early on, that 0 to 3 time frame, it can truly impact how many neurons even develop. So I don't know if you've ever seen the images. There are some good images online of severe neglect situations and what the brain scans look like. if you were neglected versus had a lot of stimulus as a baby. It's remarkable to see the difference. And 80% of our brain development is done by 3 and 90% by 5 years old. So this is all before kids even walk into a kindergarten classroom. The amount of impact on brain development that happens at home is really significant. So neurons change. Neurodevelopment is sequential. So the brain developments from the bottom to the top and from the inside out. Starts in utero. We all know this because we know things like fetal alcohol syndrome exist, right? So what a mom is putting into her body can impact a fetus. And so we need to understand that even in utero, things like stress and cortisol coursing through a mom's body is also impacting a baby. And so that can impact your brain development even before you're born. And then after you're born, it remains sequential, bottom up and inside out. So your prefrontal cortex is one of the last things to develop. That's the part of your brain that you use for things like consequential thinking and impulse control. But if the foundation of my brain was negatively impacted from neglect or abuse, we know it can impact later development as well. So really thinking about how these things play out long term. The brain is also use dependent. So the more you do something, the more you use a neural pathway, the stronger it's wired together, the faster it happens. And it's all dependent on how often you use it. If you want to be good at something as an adult, you need to make sure you continue to do it as an adolescent, because there's also a lot of neural pruning that happens during adolescence. And so there are skills that may not exist if you don't use them. For example, I didn't take Spanish until I was in high school. I cannot roll an R to save my life. Can't do it. Like, you could threaten me with jail time. You could try to shame me or fear me into anything. I cannot roll an R. That neural pathway no longer exists in my brain because it got pruned out because I didn't speak Spanish before I was almost an adult. So I bring this up because, again, we live in this world where we have a lot of comments coming from people, well-intended. You should be able to do this. You're just not willing to. If you were stronger, if you were this, maybe we just need to put you in front of a court system and hold you accountable. But there are literally things people can't do because of the impact to brain development early on in life. And us understanding what is a can't situation versus a won't situation is really critical for people feeling safe, seen, heard, and understood, and us supporting them in a way that makes sense. If it is a won't situation, maybe court involvement is helpful to have some accountability. But when it's a can't, just adding more stress and fear to my situation doesn't make me any more capable. So we need to be kind of mindful of where are people and what's truly driving what's happening and the choices they're making or the reactions that they're having. So that's the use-dependent brain. This also, it makes sense when you get kids or adults who really quickly escalate to maybe some of those more survival responses of fight and flight. If my entire childhood was unsafe, my pathway to my amygdala is like 95 without any car accidents, right? Like, it is a highway, it is flowing, it is fast. And the pathway to my prefrontal cortex, where I actually think through things, is not well developed because I was raised and continue to exist in environments where survival was more important than thinking about long-term consequences. So that highway is strong. And what I found working with kids, especially, and you can tell me if this is true for the adults that you work with, is when kids would make a good choice one time, like actually use their prefrontal cortex, they took that little dirt path to their prefrontal cortex. The next day, parents would be like, well, they did it once, so now every time they don't do it, it's because they don't want to, and they're mad and they're frustrated at their child for like, they're intentionally not doing this because I know they can. I saw them do it different. And I encourage people to look at it different, right? We need to celebrate that one time they did it different and figure out how to help them grow that dirt path, right? When we just become frustrated with them, people often feel like if my best efforts are still not celebrated or somehow still make people mad, why keep trying? Right? We are looking for people to validate us, to see us working and trying to change. And when our best efforts aren't recognized, it can be really demoralizing and just stunt growth and change. So that's another thing. I think I see that a lot in school systems too. If anyone here is connected to teaching and school systems, like really trying to figure out ways to celebrate the steps we saw somebody make. Like they paused for 10 seconds before they screamed and yelled at somebody, where usually it's like automatic. Like somehow we need to get in there and celebrate those 10 seconds. Like you did something different. How do we make 10 seconds 15 seconds? How do we make 15 seconds a minute? How do we take a minute and all of a sudden you don't get to screaming and yelling because you've learned skills in that minute to help you calm down? Okay. The human brain organizes faster than you and I have any realization that it organizes. We put things in buckets faster than you just don't even know. And it happens, it starts really early on. My little second cousin had a cat named Nino. And because our brain organizes, right, things with 4 legs that walk around are Ninos. And so he would pass a cow pasture and go, Nino, right? Because our brain just organizes information like that until we're taught more, until we know more, right? So you can teach my little second cousin, oh, that's actually a cow. That's not Nino. Nino is just your cat, right? And then all of a sudden they get all kinds of language and they then organize it differently. Oh, these are animals. Now I can organize farm animals versus household pets, right? We start to organize in lots of different ways based on information we've been given and experiences that we've had. How deep it's organized is also impacted by the experience. So if I asked you what you had for breakfast on May 2nd, many of you would be like, I've got no idea. Unless you eat the same thing for breakfast every single morning, then you're cheating and you don't get to answer the question, right? Because of course you know what you ate. So, but if I asked you, for people in the room old enough to remember where you were on 9/11, you'd tell me in a heartbeat exactly what you were doing, exactly where you were sitting, the reactions of people around you. So it's organized in ways that we can sometimes forget some of the stuff that's just kind of not that important. And we store and hold on to things that are deeply impacting to us. I share that because sometimes people come into our lives, whether it's personal or professional, and say things like, the whole week's been terrible, everything's awful. Or a student in a classroom says to a teacher, you always yell at me. And the teacher is like, I haven't yelled at you in like 5 days. Like we were doing really good, right? But what happens is all of that kind of okay stuff just gets filtered out and they hold on to these impactful moments and then present that as if it's the reality of the last time I remember us really speaking was the last time you yelled at me. So therefore, you are always yelling at me. And if you ever do any kind of family therapy or couples therapy, I think this piece is really important because a lot of conflict happens because we disagree over the details, or this person shared it in a way that I didn't experience it. But the truth is, both people's brains may have just stored the moment differently. They're both presenting their truths. And we just need to uncover how those truths got stored in different ways and how we work through it rather than focusing on the details. You may never agree on the details. Your brain stored it differently. The end. How do we move through it? Where do we go to? How do we solve it? And the other thing I'll say with that, just one more example to help like hit this home, how quickly we filter things out. People in the room, again, you can raise your hand, give a thumbs up. How many of you have been driving home from work? You pull into your parking spot, parking lot, driveway, whatever you pull into, and you think, I don't remember the last 10 minutes of driving home. Right. People, this is terrifying. I should like revoke all of your driver's licenses. No, I'm totally kidding. It's actually completely common. What happens in those last 10 minutes of your drive home is the information is so familiar, your brain filters it out as fast as it comes in. It's just done with it, doesn't need it. It's seen it 100 million times. It does not need that information. Don't have the capacity to store it. And so yes, sometimes you're thinking about other things. But again, it just doesn't matter. So it filters it out. Now, if a deer jumps out of you in those last 10 minutes, you remember that, right? You remember that jolt of cortisol, that stress moment. My arms actually tingle when I get that like cortisol. I don't know where that comes from or why, but just sharing. And so you remember those things because they impact you in different ways. So again, just getting you curious when you're working with someone professionally, personally, whatever it may be, and you're not kind of seeing things eye to eye, how it may actually be, how our brains processed it, rather than that person's lying or they're trying to lie on me or they're not telling it accurately. And the last thing I'll share with this piece is, I don't remember who it was. It was someone in the field of trauma, but they talked about the 10 to 90 rule, which is basically it only takes the 10% of the here and now to remind somebody of a trauma situation for your brain to take it the other 90. So people can have very big reactions because of the way those traumas were organized in what seems like moments that really don't match, like this doesn't warrant that reaction. And sometimes that's because our brain so quickly organizes, oh, this is familiar. My brain's going to take it the rest of the way. I'm not safe. And therefore they act and respond in ways that are much bigger and in survival responses. So not thinking about long-term consequences. I encourage you to think about that if you work with anyone who can tell you all their coping skills, can tell you all the things they can do and should do, and they know how to do, but when it comes to the actual moment, they don't do it. They go right back to the yelling, the screaming, the running, the whatever it is. That's often because our brains have gone too fast to, this is not okay, I'm unsafe. And what happens in that moment is you don't think about your coping skills, you just react. So I encourage you to think about that when you have those people, because inherently working with people that know all the things and then don't use them can be frustrating for us. And so trying to maintain that compassion and understanding and really trying to help them know what's happening for themselves and work through it. All right, lastly, there's the critical windows of development. And this is really just to say that I shared with you earlier on, 90% is done by the age of 5. That is the most critical window of development. It's the time in which we have the most influence and can really elicit a lot of change quickly. When we are outside the critical window, most often, which is what we're working with, because a lot of times we don't get people into services until they're at least 6, 7, 8, well into adulthood, we're outside the critical window. And all I want to say about that is it simply takes much more repetition and time and patience to rewire a brain that may have 35 years of being wired one way. To rewire that takes a lot of time and patience and practice and repetition. So I say this for all of our people who are like, oh, well, I did that for 2 days and it didn't help me. Yes, it is not going to help you after 2 days. And so really having that patience and not giving up on plans and changes just because they didn't work day 1, day 2, to really try to encourage people to stick to things and try new things and interact in different ways in hopes that over time, our brain starts to rewire and things start to change and it impacts us differently. All right. Those are the 5 key points of brain development. I find them very helpful to talk to my clients about. I find them helpful to talk to my kids about, although they get really mad at me and they're like, Mom, don't be a therapist to us. So, right, like I talk to anybody I can about like, oh, this is what's happening in your brain, and get really excited about it. So find it very helpful. If you do too, incorporate it. If you don't, have it in your back pocket, know kind of what's there, and you should just take it with you like that. ACEs, I am very hopeful that in 2026, many of you have heard of ACEs. If you haven't, please, I'm not going to go into it in much detail today. It's the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. It came out in the late 90s. It really just says when kids have gone through tough things early on in life, it can impact your physical health, your mental health, substance use, job satisfaction. It's correlated with incarcerations. It's correlated with about every negative life outcome you can think of. And many of the questions are rooted, going back to this is like a relational training, in how what we go through as a kid is related to relationships. So it's, were your parents separated? Did one of them have a mental health concern or a substance use concern? Was one of your parents incarcerated? Those kinds of questions that creates attachment disruptions in childhood. And so it's really indicating that these early disruptions in attachment can create long-term impacts on our life period. It really is just about every domain. So again, I'm not going to go deep into that, but there is a link in the resources slide that highlights more about the ACE study and what you need to know about it. Here are some of those correlations. I just want you to read this and take it in. I won't talk about them out loud. If anybody wants to make a comment in chat or come off mute and just react to these correlations. And I think being able to recognize how moments that shatter our sense of safety and security and any kind of resemblance of what we believe the world should be like have profound impacts on who we are as a person, and then how we feel in relationship to other people, right? And it's so individualized. For some people, they may lean in harder to relationships. For other people, they might turn away from relationships because the pain of that loss, I don't want to feel that again, so I'm just going to push everybody away, right? Like, it is profound how moments like that can change the core beliefs we have, the emotions that we feel, and it is something that I wish there were words to just make it all better and make it okay. And we're going to get into this when we talk about the simple language changes of just being with people in their pain, because pain and loss and tragedy is actually what unites us as human beings. It's something that we all experience, and being with someone in it is one of the most difficult things we can do. And it's also what we all need, is someone to bear witness to our pain, acknowledge it, be there with us, and allow us to truly feel the ways in which it has impacted us. And I know that doesn't give you a whole lot of answers. I appreciate you sharing. And I really, the ways in which you and your family heal through this, I wish you all the best, because tragedies like that are just, there's no words. I mean, I could say awful, but that doesn't even begin to touch it. Yeah. Okay. So yes, I appreciate all the compassion and responses. I don't know if you've been tracking the chat, but there's lots of love coming your way. So ACEs, yes, huge impact. And to highlight your point, tragedies and traumas in adulthood, it's not like they don't impact us. They do. It's the evidence of early childhood, because especially when we're in a situation where the source of our fear or the source of our pain is also our caregiver and our loved one, that's a whole different concept for a developing brain to try to process and understand. This is a neat study, if anyone is interested, that came out of Australia. It's the first study that starts to push us from just correlation between ACEs and long-term outcomes and impacts on health and wellness to actual causation, right? So if you remember your stats class, correlation and causation are not the same thing. But this, in Australia, they actually followed people, I believe it was over 40 years, and they could actually connect children to basically CPS reports that were made, founded events of abuse and neglect, and then track them up until age 40. And they could kind of screen out for mitigating factors. So really connecting, these outcomes are connected to abuse and neglect. And what they found is pretty significant in terms of inpatient admission for alcohol use and then other substance use. So they really looked at substance use disorders with this study. I think the link to this is also in the resources if you want to read more about it, but it's a neat article that just really starts to move us deeper into how and why we need to figure out ways to swim upstream and make sure kids aren't experiencing adversity at the levels and intensity that we have been historically, to try to help later on in life with mental health and substance use challenges. So as providers, what all this means, now that we've talked about brain development and psychosocial development and ACEs, is that we're really tasked with helping with the interpersonal and intrapersonal safety that our clients might be lacking due to their trauma, adversity, hardships, disrupted attachments, and understanding that behaviors and reactions, and sometimes choices, they were driven by this lack felt of safety, and seek to support them in healing with these early experiences rather than just focusing on symptom management, right? These are symptoms of a need. Understanding the need, healing the wound will help resolve the symptoms. Improving a sense of safety is best accomplished through corrective relational experiences. So this is the benefit. Anytime we interact with a client, anytime you interact with your family, you have the opportunity to provide really healthy, safe relational experiences that will be naturally corrective in nature. You don't need the original relationship. So if my mom was my source of fear, I don't need her to be in the therapy room with me to heal from it. I can heal and change in the context of new relationships, or even intrapersonally, how I kind of heal it through myself and with my relationship with myself. The language we use can be critical to this and critical to promoting healing. So that's what we're going to focus on for the last 40 minutes. But this is kind of a natural moment for everybody to just, if you need to turn off your camera, take a deep breath. I'm going to get a sip of water. You can get up and walk around for a second. So we're going to take just like 60 seconds to breathe and process what we just talked about before we move into the next section. And I'm going to get a sip of water while we do that. All right. Oh, hi, Hannah. It's the first time I'm seeing your little square. So, Adam, I just read your chat, and in some ways that makes complete sense. Like the cortisol levels, and they always talk about how stress can play into like allergic reactions and histamine and all that kind of stuff. So that's really interesting that there's actually like a study on how 3 or more medication intolerances or allergies strongly predict a high ACE score. And if ACEs create lots of cortisol and lots of stress, in some ways that makes sense. But thank you for sharing. That's really neat and interesting. Okay, yeah, very interesting. Well, and that's the ACEs study didn't come from the mental health field. The researcher from ACEs was actually at an obesity clinic. So it is interesting how sometimes it's more of our primary care medication or medical field that kind of stumbles onto these things. All right, here we go. We've got about 35 minutes to really kind of do some quick language shifts. These are just things, again, if you take one, if you take two, if you take a concept rather than an actual language shift. Anything that doesn't feel authentic, don't try to use it. Your clients will know it. They'll be like, why did you just say that? Like, this feels awkward. So don't say anything just because it's on the slide. And none of these are a magic fix. None of these you're going to go say to a client and they're going to be like, I don't need therapy anymore. I'm good to go. Just like that kind of critical window. Like, these are patterns. This is repetition of people hearing this over and over again. Some of these came from when I was working with kids who had really complex needs, and I'd go to their whole treatment team, and people would be like, you're not making progress with this kid. And I would feel like a really terrible therapist, but then I would recognize they get compassion and understanding in therapy, but then they spend all these hours outside of therapy where people are talking to them in ways that make them feel unseen and unheard and not cared about and unlovable and broken. And so, yes, my hour of therapy doesn't touch it. It never did, because the amount of relational wounds that just kept piling up were impossible to keep up with. So I envisioned this world where if we all spoke to people in ways that promoted dignity and respect and compassion and empathy, how healing could it be for all of us that in every domain of our life, we were spoken to in this way. So that's where some of these language changes came from. You don't need to be a clinician to implement them. It's really just the way we talk. All right. And so instead of you need, right, every red arrow is going to be remove this from your language, and the green arrow is going to be add this to your language, right? You need to come to therapy more often. I don't really know that they need that. I need you to come to therapy more often for my interventions to feel effective and helpful. I need to see you more frequently to make sure we're monitoring what's happening in your life and we're using the evidence-based model that I use, right? That's my need. Or you deserve to come to therapy more often so that you can heal the wounds that we're working through. How different does that feel than you need to show up more frequently? And I'm not trying to suggest that any of you would say it exactly like that to a client, but just for stressing the difference purposes. Really important to stress what is my need and frame it that way. This is my need. I need you to get with a psychiatrist because I'm worried that therapy alone isn't sufficient for managing your medications. or you deserve to take your medications more regularly to see if they actually have a positive impact on you. And if they don't, then we need to go advocate differently, right? These are things that the way we just explain what I need and what you deserve can help people shift away. When I hear you need from anybody, I'm like, don't you tell me what I need to do, right? It doesn't matter who it's from. I get defensive really quick, and I'm a fairly healthy, functioning adult, right? So just kind of thinking through how you need lands versus I need or you deserve. Non-compliance, again, just kind of a label, and it really doesn't help us, right? It doesn't help me to know that like you're just not doing it. Is it you're not willing to do it? Is there a logistical problem? Like if I work a 9 to 5 and I don't show up to my 10 a.m. therapy appointment, am I non-compliant, or am I just at work and I've never been able to make this work? Like how do we shift the appointment time, or do I need to seek a new therapist? Is it unwilling? Is it unable? We need to dive a little deeper into what's driving non-compliance, non-adherence, whatever you want to call it. What's the barrier? What's getting in the way? How do we meet it with compassion and a willingness to dig into what's going on with a person rather than just sticking a label on it? Most of you probably heard this at this point in time. What's wrong with you? Replace that. What happened to you, right? I say this is one we've probably all heard, and it's a pretty common one and a fairly easy shift. I'll tell you, what's wrong with you still comes out of my mouth sometimes, like especially with my own children when they've got me like heightened. I'm like, what is wrong with you? And then I like backtrack. I'm like, oh, sorry, that was not helpful, right? Like I was frustrated. I said something that I should not have. And so working really hard to say like, what happened to you, or what just happened here? Like, what just happened in this moment where I'm getting a really big reaction from you that I'm confused about? Like, what's going on? What happened? And we're people who live and exist in the context of our environments and our relationships. So we live inside of a family, who lives inside of a community, who lives inside of a society, who lives inside of global kind of stressors, right? And so to understand people more about like what's happening collectively, it may be inside of you, but it may be more relational as well, really helps highlight the problem as a bigger thing than just there's something wrong with you. Especially for our clients who already feel a deep sense of shame, asking like what's wrong with you is only going to get a response. Shame responses actually mirror trauma responses. It's basically fight, flight, freeze. So just kind of keeping that in mind. This is that one that I was talking about, bearing witness to other people's pain. Sometimes a lot of us got into this field to help people. And so when they share pain or they share anger, we want to like rescue them. I know personally I do. Like I will own that. I'm like, okay, how do we get you out of this? All right, like let's solve this problem. Let's help you feel better. But when we do that too fast, when we lean into the at least or try to minimize, right? At least it was just a car accident. You didn't whatever, right? When we try to like make people feel better by comparing it to something bigger, it's an empathic failure. We fail to connect. We fail to just see the person. We fail to just sit with them in pain and distress and acknowledge and validate and help it just get the space that it needs. Because the only way through deep, dark, hard feelings is through them. We can't shove them down. We can't pretend they're not there. We can't rescue people out of them. We have to help them through it. And so being with it, seeing it through, helping them. We can't sit in it forever, right? We can't for 16 years sit there just sitting in grief and sadness, right? We have to know what am I bearing witness to, and what am I helping that part heal towards? Having both things in mind can help guide relationships. So taking away your desire to rescue people and help them just not feel the pain, just sitting there with them and saying, oh my gosh, that's painful. and just be with them, right? I think there's like a Winnie the Pooh and Eeyore picture of that, where like Pooh comes and sits down next to Eeyore, and Eeyore's kind of like, what are you doing? And Pooh's like, just sitting. And it's like the cutest little thing. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. So just kind of keeping that in mind, that our Eeyore's my favorite. Yes, Eeyore is fantastic. I have to be honest with you. I don't know, maybe it's just me. When people start a sentence like that, I'm on edge. I'm like, oh, what's coming next? Like, what are you about to tell me? And so again, you can totally disagree with me on this one and say, that doesn't bother me at all. I do think switching things to out of respect for you, it's been really helpful in some of the work that I do. I've been a part of commitment hearings at psychiatric hospitals where I'm like telling people I'm going to recommend you stay here at the hospital. Not an easy thing to tell people, right? But it's also something that's happening no matter what. So keeping it from them or blindsiding them later on with this is my recommendation doesn't feel good. So starting the sentence with out of respect for you, I want you to know what I'm about to go recommend. And I know it's not easy for you to hear, but you deserve honesty. You deserve respect. And so I'm going to tell you this tough thing. I encourage pre-screeners to tell people they're going to recommend hospitalization, right? Like, again, everything has context. There's going to be a client or two where like you're really fearful that they're going to escalate. And like, yes, read the room, know your client, do what's best for you. But generally speaking, I think giving people honest, helpful information and phrasing it in the way of saying, I'm telling you this out of respect for you. I honor you as a person enough to tell you this to your face, to tell you this tough thing that I know isn't going to be easy to hear. You can't do that, or that isn't a healthy choice, right? I don't know about you. I don't go off to work with my clients. I don't go off to school with them. I don't go back to their house. I can't tell them not to do something because I'm not there I don't control them. I'm not there to control the outcome, right? And sometimes I have a big like defiant part inside of me. You tell me I can't do something, it only makes me more like curious and want to do it. Like, I'm like, oh, tell me I can't. Watch me. Right? So I'm not saying everybody's like that, but removing that and giving people the space. I've worked with plenty of kids. I want to punch my dad in the face. Okay, let's take a closer look at that. What are you hoping is going to happen by punching your dad in the face? Well, I just want my video games. Okay, like, let's walk this out for a moment. You punch your dad in the face. Tell me how that gets you to your video games, right? And like helping someone use that prefrontal cortex, right? We're creating a relationship and an experience where they're in this moment where they don't have to rush to the fight, flight, freeze. They don't have to punch dad in the face. Let's really try to get that neural pathway to your prefrontal cortex thinking about, will this actually get you what you want? It is a choice you have. Can we possibly come up with others that might get you closer to what you were actually looking for? What else could you do besides punching your father, right? How else might you be able to gain access to your video games? And so really just allowing people the space to explore, like, I really want to do this, or I want to run away, or I want to, like, you can't do that, right? I don't control that. I don't want them to do that. I don't think it would be a great thing in terms of outcomes, but I also don't control it. So let's take a look at it and just kind of dig through some short-term, immediate consequences, long-term, help people think. Okay. Attention seeking. This label can feel really, I want to say attacking. Just feels really hurtful for some people to feel like you think I'm only doing this to get attention. The reality is we all need connection. Judgmental. That's a great word. Thank you. This is why having a group of people is just so fantastic. You guys are just feeding me good language. Yes, judgmental. We all need connection. We all need security. And sometimes that is through the context of a relationship. And so I might do things that you could consider attention seeking, but just shifting the language to, yeah, you needed connection or you needed a sense of security. So you did something to get somebody to respond. and just shifting that, helping people see it as a basic human need. We are biologically designed to connect. We do not survive without connection. And so to see it as something that we all need is just a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more empathy for what's going on. Manipulative, again, just a simple shift. When I meet people who other people describe as chronically manipulative, I am automatically curious about 0 to 1.5 and what happened to them during that time frame. The definition of manipulation is meeting your needs in alternative ways. Babies who aren't cared for between 0 to 1.5 have no option but to figure out alternative ways to meet their needs. They might rely on a sibling. There's studies from orphanages from overseas about them developing their own languages, or babies reaching through slats and cribs to hold each other's bottles up because nobody else is doing it for them, right? If you don't trust that other people will do things for you and meet your needs, you, at a core of who you are, believe I must meet my needs, however I may need to meet my needs. And that's okay, because this is how I survive. And what served them from 0 to 1.5 and kept them alive and allowed them to survive is now detrimental and hurting them because they're meeting their needs in alternative ways that are oftentimes not helpful long-term, but does meet their need in the here and now. And so how we just see that differently, again, doesn't change the behavior. I'm not asking you to change anything. I'm just asking you to look at it a little differently to understand what needs to happen here. If this person felt safer and felt like adults around them could be trusted, would they be less manipulative? Would they stop seeking to meet their needs in alternative ways? Okay. Manic, delusional, psychotic, paranoid. These labels all have a place. I mean, again, when we tell someone you're acting manic, like, I don't know that that's particularly helpful to people. I also, in my experience with working with individuals who are in manic episodes or experiencing some kind of delusions, there's almost always a grain of truth somewhere in there. It's rooted, it's connected. And when I ask people, you're paranoid at night, have you ever had something happen in your life that gives you reason to be concerned for your safety at night? Anecdotally, right? I haven't done the research, but anecdotally, 100% of the time it is yes, something has happened to me in my life. And so it doesn't come from nowhere. Oftentimes these symptoms, the psychosis, this paranoia, this delusion, started somewhere. And if we can listen to people's grains of truth, if we can understand how this might be connected to trauma, if we can help them heal, I'm not saying that, it would resolve schizophrenia and all that kind of stuff. I'm just asking that we not just hear psychosis and automatically think schizophrenia and medications. Psychosis is actually a fairly common symptom. Hallucinations is a fairly common symptom for kids who have early childhood trauma, right? And so how we kind of sort through and help people with some of these symptoms from a compassionate way, from an understanding way. I was sitting at a beginning of a NICABM training. Don't quote NICA, National Institute for Clinical Application of Behavioral Medicine. I don't know. Somebody can Google it and make sure I'm right about that. And one of the trainers was talking about another concept of grandiosity, because that often gets thrown in when people are delusional and they're grandiose. And what they were sharing is that grandiosity and shame, it's like the same energy in opposite directions, fueled by contempt. So like the energy here is contempt for self, where grandiosity is like a contempt for others. And I was like, whoa, that's just really neat information. I didn't really have time to process it all and like dig into this more, but it made me interested just in how that's an energy in different directions. And I was like, that's really neat. So just again, for understanding, for context, for helping, having these things in the back of your mind about how we work with someone who might have been labeled as manic, delusional, psychotic, paranoid. You don't actually want to hurt yourself. You don't actually want to whatever, fill in the blank, right? This kind of goes back to the like telling people not to do something. We're also just much more complex people. Part of me might want to hurt myself. Part of me might want to die by suicide, right? There's a part that might be in pain so intensely that it doesn't want to be alive. There are also probably parts, the reason they're talking to you about it, right? There are parts of them that might not want to do it. And so to help people see the complexity, if you can ask someone who's experiencing suicidal thoughts, right? Does all of you want to do that, or is it part of you? A lot of times they can acknowledge, it's a piece of me. There's a part of me that wants to be around for my daughter's birthday. There's a part of me that wants to be able to do this, this, and this. And the pain feels so intense some days that I don't want to go on, right? And so really helping people understand the complexities of themselves and that it's okay that parts don't always agree. And then you can, really get into the parts. How do we bolster a safety plan? A lot of times in a safety plan, we focus on interpersonal. Who are you going to call? Who can you reach out to a crisis provider, right? But what's the intrapersonal plan for safety? How do we bolster the parts that want to live while also acknowledging and not just trying to shut down the part that doesn't? The more, is it Dan Siegel? The more you resist, the more it persists, right? The more you just tell a part of you, I don't believe that, or I don't want to do that, you go away, like basically exiling your suicidal part, sometimes the louder it gets, right? How do the parts that want to live see that hurt part and say, here's how we're going to help you feel better rather than dying by suicide, right? So just kind of some thoughts about how you talk to people about things they want to do. And it could be relevant to individuals in substance use treatment. Part of you might want to use that substance, right? Are there parts that don't? Are there parts who are further along in their recovery that are saying, that's not a great idea, right? So how we incorporate some of that into the work that we do. All right, your turn. Group's turn. What could we use? What kind of shift of language? If you work at a community services board, we've all talked about clients as frequent, maybe, let me not say all, that's I personally have had conversations where we've talked about frequent flyers at the CSB, right? What's a reframe there? What's different language we could use to talk about that? Anybody? When you need support, needs more supports. Yeah, complex needs. Right? If the problem was easy to solve, they would have solved it already. But there's complex needs. There's complex pain. Yes, exactly. Dependent on the system. What do you think we can replace that with? Yep. Supported by the system. Needs assistance with resources.
Needs a connection that they're not getting.
Absolutely, right? And sometimes in what ways have we, the system, promoted the dependence on the system? I've worked with a lot of parents who were involved with all the child serving systems and felt like they couldn't make parental decisions without asking all the system players first because they didn't want to get judged. Right? And it was like, oh, wait, we're now mad at them for calling us, but we also created the situation. So, yes, the ways that can we connect them is this the only place they're getting connection, right? This might be connectedness. This might be they just need additional resources that we haven't made available to them. And so I encourage us to think about, how is the system a part of this too? All right, in addition to language shifts, we can also just talk about some paradigm shifts. So we've kind of covered some of these throughout the training, so we'll go through these quickly. Instead of focusing on symptoms, stopping anger, stopping substance use, right? Don't smoke that cigarette, whatever. Focus on understanding the root cause, the need under the behavior or the symptom. What's driving this? How do we help meet that so it doesn't get met through this symptom? Doing assessments for people that isn't just driven by, I've got to get this assessment done. It's 15 points long. I've got to check every box for my chart and my insurance. Really focused on the person in front of you. Are we hearing them? Are we hearing their needs? Are we hearing their pain? Are we present with them? Is the process of the assessment engaging and still human rather than just this piece of paper that I must get submitted because in order to have services approved, I have to have this assessment done. And don't get me wrong, there's a balance to that, because the truth is, yes, you need an assessment done to get insurance to pay for things, but don't lose the human in that. Outcome focused to process and outcome focused. What do I mean by that? Insurance, again, is going to tell us we've got to have outcomes. We've got to have concrete goals that are SMART goals and, achievable and measurable and all that kind of stuff. But don't forget about the process, because the process facilitates the outcome. And I'll share an example of, I worked with one young person who was not with their biological family. Lots of aggression, lots of mood instability. Of course, all the goals were around managing emotions and no longer having violent outbursts and, that kind of stuff. But one of the sessions where we were focusing on more of a process thing was about how each person fills their own love bucket, right? Like if we all had a love bucket, what fills it? And the kid during this session was so kind of disengaged, looked disconnected, looked like they weren't paying attention. But 45 minutes in, just sat there, very flat, very sad, said, what if there's so much yuck inside of my bucket, it doesn't have room for love? And it was this profound moment for both the caregivers and me to remember that the rage, the anger, the outbursts, it wasn't because of what the parents were, even the caregivers were necessarily doing. It was this kid's got so much pain from the past that they didn't have the capacity to feel the love that the new caregivers were trying to give to her. And it didn't change any of the outbursts, but it did help with an outcome. It reduced some of the caregiving stress because they saw that kid through a new lens. I saw the kid through a new lens, and it helped all of us kind of reduce stress and remember what's driving the outburst. This isn't a bad kid who's just angry and trying to make these caregivers angry. She's hurt and not capable of receiving love right now from the hurt from the past. So just a quick example. Shifting from an individual focus to a system focus, that could be internal family systems, right? That parts language I just talked about, or really understanding how their family or community or society might be impacting their functioning, right? We all exist in the context of relationships, and safety in all of those domains can impact our mental well-being. Trying not to get confused or frustrated with a client's behavior, really looking at each situation with how does this make sense? Under what circumstances? Did it work for them? Did it somehow serve a purpose in the past but is now detrimental? How, under what circumstances would I be acting in the exact same way? What just happened here? Really just trying to be curious and dig deeper with people. I also want to say, not having firm boundaries is not a healthy skill for dealing with people, right? I've been talking about compassion and understanding and holding space. all of that needs to happen in the context of boundaries. And we need to have boundaries with people because we believe in them. When you don't have expectations of people and boundaries, they know it. And it can be a signal for people that you've given up on me. If I don't hold you to the same standard I hold everybody else to, and you know it, you kind of know, like you don't believe I'm capable of what everybody else is. And so we hold boundaries in firm ways that say, because I believe in you, I'm going to ask you to meet this expectation. We're not going to just put it out there and make them go do it, right? How do I help you get there? What do you need to get there? But hold the boundaries because we believe in them, because we know what they're capable of, because we want to see them be successful. Keep gently challenging people. Don't just avoid hard conversations because they're hard, right? That out of respect for you, that, I'm going to be open with you. This may be hard to hear, but this is what's about to happen, right? People benefit from knowing tough things so that they can prepare for them rather than us blindsiding them, right? That keeps old patterns going. And remember, we're trying to shift to corrective relational experiences. Being able to tell somebody this tough thing is about to happen is different than just letting it happen to them. And so it's corrective in nature, even though a tough thing is still about to happen. So just kind of thinking about that. Your turn to think about a paradigm shift. If you're thinking about someone coming in at, 3:00 today going, ugh, I have to see this client today. How do you reframe your thinking? I get to help this client today. That's right. You might be their only person. Yep. I look forward to the challenges. Yes. Right. These complex needs need complex support. And I'm a part of that. I get the privilege to work with this person today, right? You get to help someone through pain. Yes. So lots of good ways to reframe it and just kind of remember with those tough people, it's because they have tough pain. And when we're able to do these things and create relational safety, it does take more than just language, just really focusing on intentional repair work, knowing what their wounds were, if it was neglect, if it was abuse, knowing kind of what areas they feel like they need intentional repair work around. And that can be, again, intrapersonally. Maybe they have a caregiving part inside that can help them do repair work. Managing the environment so they do feel safe in the environment. This can include things like what's on your walls and the temperature in the room. And if you have food and snacks and drink available, this can be lots of different things. But just kind of keeping all of that in mind as well. And the potential benefits are, these are all the things that, insurance wants to see, right? Like, don't lose track of the person, but we're an insurance driven company or business, I guess. I don't know. That sounds terrible, but it's person-centered. It's recovery and wellness oriented. It's belief, hope, and positive focused. Therapeutic alliance, we know from research, is strongly correlated with therapy outcomes. And if you can keep some of these shifts in mind and use language that connects and creates corrective relational experiences, you're going to get the alliance. That's helpful. That is all my content, which means we have a whole 4 minutes for questions or for comments, for aha moments, for things that you're going to take away. We have 4 minutes as a group to just kind of chat about that. And I'll stop sharing while we do that.
One of the things that was really interesting to me, I have a special needs kid, and every time I would take her to the doctors, they were very inquisitive about my pregnancy, like my mental health during a pregnancy, and I didn't understand the correlation between my mental health and the things that she was going through. So earlier in your discussion, you were kind of explaining how the brain works and the functioning and all of that stuff. So you gave me way more insight on that whole concept than all the doctors did. So thank you for that.
Well, good. I'm glad that information was helpful. And truly, like, this information, I started with it. It can help you professionally. It's now how I try to speak to everyone in my life, because again, I want to see a world where everywhere people go, they're not confronted, they're treated with this language that connects and heals and helps people feel seen and heard. I think we all deserve that, because the truth is we've all had relational wounds, whether you have major trauma histories, big T, tons of ACEs or not. We all have relational wounds that impact us too today. And I could share mine with you, but we would be here for another 3 hours and you don't really want to hear all that. Anybody else? Final closing thoughts? Yeah. Again, if anything, I hope something sparked your curiosity. I hope you take one language shift, something that you can actually do today, right? Take trauma-informed concept as a big, this thing's huge and we must be trauma-informed, and take it down to, this is the thing I can do to be trauma-informed today. I'm going to use the language of I need and you deserve, or whatever you take with you. So thank you so much, everybody, for taking 90 minutes out of your life to spend with me and on this training. I really appreciate it.